Welcome to episode 7 of the Scott Ritter Show. Um, this week, we're going to address the issue of arms control, in particular, involving nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons, of course, are all the rage right now in the mainstream media with headlines around the world speaking about the danger of nuclear conflict between Russia and NATO over the events ongoing in Ukraine. Um, we'll talk about whether or not this is overly hyped or if this is a real threat or if it's somewhere in between. But we're also going to talk about the importance of avoiding nuclear conflict with a focus on arms control. You know, the United States and Russia are possess the two largest nuclear arsenals in the world. And this has been the case from the very beginning of the existence of nuclear weapons. Of course, the United States started what has become known as the nuclear arms race by building and using nuclear weapons during the Second World War. The Soviet Union followed suit in producing its own nuclear weapon as a deterrent to the American weapons. And since that time, we've seen an escalation of the development of nuclear weapons that are designed solely for the purpose of killing large numbers of the enemy. Whether if in the United States it's used to kill Russians or Chinese, or from the Russian perspective or former Soviet perspective, to kill Americans. And I think both sides eventually acknowledged that to use nuclear weapons was to guarantee the destruction of not only your society but the entire world. And a notion of mutually assured destruction was grown. So with the concept of if one side uses a nuclear weapon, then the other side will use theirs, and everybody will die. And with that accumulation of what one would think is very logical premise, the United States and the Soviet Union began a track of finding out how to control nuclear weapons, initially by talking about limiting the numbers, limiting the types, limiting the capabilities, but eventually talking about actually reducing the numbers, drawing down these weapons with the ultimate goal of being zero, no nuclear weapons. Of course, this objective has not been achieved, and the issue of arms control between the United States and Russia, United States and the Soviet Union has gone through various cycles. It seems that history always conspires against the arms controllers. In the aftermath of the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 1960s, John F. Kennedy and then Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev seemed to be on the path towards reaching some sort of consensus on controlling nuclear weapons. But then John F. Kennedy was assassinated and Nikita Khrushchev was removed from power. Lyndon Johnson was never able to fully pick up the mantle of disarmament. He tried, but then in 1968, the Soviets moved in on Czechoslovakia, and that shot down that premise. In the 70s, the United States and the Soviet Union engaged in what's called the Strategic Arm Limitation Talks, but these hit a brick wall in 1979 with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan and then President Jimmy Carter withdrawing or not allowing the SALT II treaty to be ratified. We did have some successes. The Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty was an outgrowth of mutually assured destruction. That is, as long as each side understands that to initiate nuclear conflict means the end of everybody, there's no need to build defenses. That defenses were actually destabilizing because it would allow for people to believe I can defend against a nuclear attack. Therefore, maybe I can launch a first strike, ride out their counterstrike, and win a nuclear war. So the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty was designed to remove any concept of surviving a nuclear attack. That was a treaty, 1972, very successful. In the 1980s, we entered sort of a very dark period where the United States and the Soviet Union simply didn't trust one another. And, we had several incidents that nearly brought both nations on the brink of nuclear war, whether it be the NATO exercise Able Archer 83 or the Soviet detection of what could have been a surprise missile attack by the United States, but only by the courage and foresight of a Soviet duty officer who didn't believe what he was seeing and delayed transmission of the appropriate orders, thereby forestalling a potential Soviet counterstrike. I think both sides were scared by what had occurred. And by 1986, you had Ronald Reagan and then Premier Gorbachev meeting in Reykjavik, where they almost got rid of all nuclear weapons. Eventually, that didn't happen because of Strategic Defense Initiative, sort of a rebirth of the ABM concept that the Soviets objected to. But they were able to come to agreement in December of 1987 on the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, a treaty that got rid of an entire category of destabilizing nuclear weapons in Europe. And this treaty sort of set the standard, the gold standard of what arms control should be. A treaty that had mutual requirements, mutual verification, on-site inspection, actual inspectors on the ground, and it was very successful. It achieved its goals and objectives. But it was sort of the one brief shining moment, a Camelot of arms control, because shortly thereafter, the Soviet Union collapsed. The United States stopped taking arms control seriously. The follow-on treaty, the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, was ratified but late in the game. And it just, things went downhill from there, with the United States sort of stopping being a reliable negotiating partner. And ultimately, the inevitable happened. The United States withdrew from the ABM Treaty in 2002. The United States withdrew from the INF Treaty in 2019. The United States has undertaken measures that seem to be undermining confidence in the START Treaty. And the world once again finds itself where we were in the 1960s, with virtually uncontrolled development of nuclear weapons by both sides. New and very capable weapons being fielded by the Russians, and the United States getting ready to modernize their arsenal. So I don't think there's a better time than now to have a meaningful discussion about arms control, and I don't think there's a better person to have this discussion with than Vladimir Kozin. Vladimir Kozin is a leading expert. He works for the Center of Military Studies in Moscow State Institute of International Relations. He's an author. He's a member of the Russian Academy of the Natural Sciences. He's a professor. Hey, he's an expert about arms control, and he's the author of this book. And I also call him my friend. Vladimir, thank you very much for being here today. It's an honor and a privilege to talk with you. You heard my my monologue introducing the topic. Do you have anything you'd like to add to it?
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Scott. It's very nice to hear you once again. You actually made a very comprehensive, though very short, list of activities in especially nuclear arms control between our two great nations. I'm not going to go down into history, but I would like to concentrate and focus on the current developments. Where do we stand? Where do we stand? Actually, we have New START Treaty in Russian START 3, which will be valid till February 2026. We do not have any agreement between our nations concerning tactical nuclear weapons. And by the way, there are a number of terminological obstacles how to identify tactical weapons. In nuclear arms control between the Soviet Union and the USA, Russia and the USA, we invented only one criteria for identifying strategic nuclear weapons, INF nuclear weapons, and tactical nuclear weapons. That's the distance of delivery distance of delivery, bombs by aircraft, missiles by missiles or submarines, or land-based intercontinental ballistic missiles, etc. So still we are witnessing deployment of the U.S. Again, tactical nuclear weapons in Europe, in 4 countries, namely Belgium, the Netherlands, Italy, the Federal Republic of Germany, and in the Asian part of Turkey. So altogether 5. Russia doesn't have any nuclear capability outside its territory, on the territory of other nations. But our 2 nations are exercising routine patrol involving SSBN, or Strategic Submarine Ballistic Nuclei, in the world ocean, plus heavy strategic bombers, and land-based ICBM or intercontinental ballistic missiles are located on our respective continental territories. So I don't know when we sit together and tackle 2 major issues in nuclear arms. Either the next extension of the New START, which expires, as we identified, in February 2026, or it will be a totally new START, so to say. And addressing the NPT review conference on the 1st of August this year, President Joseph Biden made a proposal. I think it is a proposal. It's not like a hint. It's actually a formulated proposal to sit together and to debate absolutely new treaty in strategic offensive arms, namely the newest START, or START 4. And he also asked the Russian Federation to join Washington respective negotiation teams to debate this issue. He didn't talk about tactical nuclear weapons, but what is obvious from the response of Washington to Moscow's security guarantees offer, tabled in last December, in December 2029, and we've got a response. So it seems to us that the US side is not happy to remove tactical nuclear capabilities from European countries and from Asian part of Turkey. Today I submitted my own views, private views, to called Zvezda Weekly, in Russian Еженедельник Zvezda, specifically devoted to the issue raised by President Joseph Biden on the 1st of August, last month, previous month, in August. And I said that the time has not come to debate this issue in the present day situation. But the present day situation is not in favor of starting such kind of talks devoted to New START Treaty number 4. Military encounter in Ukraine, deployment of anti-ballistic missile operational bases in Romania. It's operational, and soon will be operational in Poland. And we consider that this kind of facilities can be used for housing not only defensive or interceptor missiles, weapons, but also offensive, like land-based cruise missiles, nuclear tip, and in the future also hypersonic missiles. We are still living, we in the Russian Federation and the Kaliningrad region or Kaliningradskaya Oblast, we're still living while watching day in, day out, continuously and annually, the NATO Air Force operation called Baltic Air Policing in the airspace of three Baltic nations, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, plus Poland also joined this this operation. This operation has dual capable aircraft of all three Western nuclear powers, and we do not know what kind of airdrop bomb this interceptor bombers of the United Kingdom, France, and the United States, which are on regular routine flights, overflights over the four independent nations, NATO allies, and in the space above the Baltic Sea. We do not know what kind of weapons they are carrying, because we can't send our inspectors, because we have never conducted any negotiations whatsoever on this specific issue. Unfortunately, I would like to tell the esteemed audience that President Joseph Biden has not canceled the practice of sending heavy strategic bombers certified as carriers of nuclear bombs and missiles, sending them on also on a frequent patrol to Europe and in the other side of the Russian Federation in Asian part in the Pacific. So 19 military airfields have been offered by the US NATO allies to give a possibility to land on landing strips of these airfields, have a rest, and then go again very close to the Russian Federation. In Kaliningradskaya Oblast, where my mom is living still, we have witnessed training air exercises involving American B-52H that dropped dummy missiles against Lithuanian military airfield 60 kilometers from the official border, state border separating Lithuania and Kaliningrad Oblast region. And even before special military operation of the Russian Federation in Ukraine, the same type of aircraft flew from Poland, accompanied in the Ukrainian airspace by Ukrainian interceptors, and moved closely to Mariupol, and made a kind of frequent sorties, and even approached the Russian Federation very close to our border. The distance between the aircraft I'm talking about and the Russian Federation territory was only 20 kilometers. So it was a kind of special case, not frequently arranged, but it caused a kind of indignation and unhappiness amongst our military and political leaders. And final brush as to nuclear strategies. We had a lot. We had a lot of debates on the respective doctrines between NATO alliance and of the Warsaw Treaty Organization, Warsaw Treaty Organization Pact. But this kind of debates brought no fruitful results. But what is going on in this particular domain? Well, the U.S. has 14 cases specifying or giving a chance to U.S. strategic nuclear forces to use nuclear weapons. 14. During Barack Obama's presidency, the U.S. had 6 such cases, twice as less. We have in the Russian Federation the current effective operational nuclear strategy only 2 cases. Unfortunately, the President of the United States, it doesn't matter what are the good names, starting from 1945 till now, and probably in the future, the U.S. President, as well as Commander-in-Chief of the American forces, has exclusive right to use nuclear weapons upon his own will, upon his own discretion. In my country, triada or trio, troika, can make a final decision authorized by the upper house of the Russian parliament, the Senate. 3 persons president. He's at the same time, like in the United States, the supreme commander. Then the Minister of Defense and his deputy of the Minister of Defense, who is at the same time the head of general staff of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. So no first use is knocking at the door of nuclear arms control as initial step. In the past, it was backed by anti-nuclear movements, researchers, and even politicians. But for the time being, it has been pigeonholed. But currently, this notion is being in the world public agenda again and again. We call it nuclear no first use. Americans are using the same term, nuclear first strike. It doesn't matter, because until we are having nuclear capabilities, be it strategic or tactical one, we have to make one step forward. Very innocent, because no first use or no first strike actually could trigger the process of more deep reductions of strategic offensive arms, nuclear arms, and tactical nuclear weapons. But when it will start, well, actually, I don't know. The perspectives are very gloomy, in the haze. And as I said at the beginning of my remark, it's very difficult to imagine that we can sit together, especially when the Russian Federation is adversary number 1. It's called aggressor, it's called annexor, and we have heard many threats from ex-US officials that the Pentagon would like to use nuclear weapons against the Russian Federation. So, that's it.
Well, let me throw something out here. In the United States, if I go and I grab materials from esteemed think tanks, from Harvard, from MIT, Princeton, Rand Corporation, Brookings Institute, one thing jumps out continuously, and that is the so-called escalate to de-escalate. You see, we believe that Russia has a third a third nuclear doctrine that's been articulated indirectly by various Russian officials, where they would actually use nuclear weapons preemptively in order to escalate an effort to intimidate the United States and NATO to back down. So you escalate to de-escalate. Is this part of Russia's nuclear doctrine?
No, Scott. You will never find this expression having two words. You will never find it in our political statements, be it during the presidency of Mr. Putin or his predecessors. It's not our cup of tea, believe me. And I don't know from where esteemed American scholars and academics just retrieved this kind of two words statement concerning us. But look, on the contrary, we are believing that America is committed to this kind of strategy because recently in the past, your military people conducted two types of exercises, conventional exercises and nuclear exercises separately from each other. It was logical. But recently we have noticed that the Pentagon is sometimes, not all times, but sometimes, starting military drills, maneuvers, exercises, quite massive, on a massive scale, that begin as a conventionally arranged drills, but at the latest stages in the framework of escalation are winding up, are finishing with the using of tactical weapons. Well, dummy weapons, naturally, not physically nuclear weapons per se, God forbid. So, and we also noticed that this kind of nuclear capable drills are included into the areas of forward deployment that is very close to our territory and to our borders, and to Kaliningrad region and to Republic of Belarus, our ally. So, no, I cannot share this notion, and I would be very glad if somebody from those think tanks you enumerated send me any kind of material proof that Russia allegedly is committed, has invented this kind of strategy or just doctrine. So, but no, we do not. And if you examine the active Russian military doctrine, it has a special passage concerning nuclear weapons employment, and the recent updated it's called Basic Principles of the Russian policy in terms of deterrence. You will never find this kind of two words: escalation for the escalation for de-escalation, or something like that. No, yet.
Well, it's curious because I mean, first of all, I 100% agree with you. I threw that out there just as a point of discussion. And just by way of adding to that, it was the United States that has deployed a new weapon, the low-yield nuclear warhead, W76-2, on our ballistic missile submarines. And we have actually used it in an exercise, I think most recently in 2019, where we escalated to de-escalate. So it appears that we've somehow mirror imaged our own policy onto Russia. be that as may. You spoke of the tactical nuclear weapons and the problems, and you also spoke about the way that we traditionally account for nuclear weapons through the delivery systems. But with the B-61 bomb, which is the principal nuclear weapon that the United States has deployed with NATO, the delivery system would be an F-35A fighter. That is the nuclear capable version of the F-35. And recently, NATO held a nuclear conference where right now the nuclear bombs will only be used with certain designated countries who have committed to using these weapons on behalf of NATO. But now NATO is talking about any nation that possesses an F-35A should be considered nuclear capable and trained to deliver. What kind of problems does this create for Russia? For instance, Finland has committed to purchase, I believe, 65 F-35As. If Finland joins NATO, that means that Finland now has 65 nuclear delivery systems. It means that every F-35, whether it be in Poland, in Italy, anywhere, is a nuclear delivery system. Or am I getting this wrong?
No, you are right. You are right because F-35 it has three variants. One you mentioned A or Alpha, then B Bravo, and C Charlie. So Alpha and Charlie are nuclear capable. F-35C or Charlie, it's aircraft carrier based aircraft. B is F-35 belonging to Marine Corps of the United States and not nuclear capable. But actually the US government is exporting to the NATO allies and non-NATO allies, namely F-35A or Alpha. Yes, it is nuclear capable. And the bomb you mentioned from B-61 family, namely the latest one, B-6112, is a high-tech gimmick in the US nuclear inventory. And though it has less nuclear yield than other members of the B-61 family of the previous previous variants like B-61-7 or B-61-11, because sometimes those tactical weapons I mentioned, they are they have much more powerful nuclear yield than, for example, American ICBM that sometimes has 100 kiloton one missile, and the bomb like B-61-11 as maximum bomb with the maximum nuclear yield up to 400 kilotons, so 4 times as much. Yes, a lot of NATO European nations have bought F-35A. Not only Finland is going to buy, the decision has been made, but also the UK has bought it, Denmark, Norway, Poland, and Romania, if I'm not mistaken, and Italy, yes, a long time ago. And the problem is that this dual capable aircraft are also would be sent to take part in the Baltic air policing operation into 4 nations just living on the coast of the Baltic Sea. So it's a forward-based elements of nuclear power, and it's very close to us, to Belarus, to the Kaliningrad region, and to the Russian Federation, to St. Petersburg, and to the western part of European Russian territory. So it should be also debated, not excluded. But unfortunately, I would like to remind that's not my invention. It is a practice we borrowed from the past. We both used selective method of downsizing nuclear capabilities. Selective means that we decided first to limit and then to reduce nuclear capabilities, but unfortunately left aside some other capabilities. Like, for example, we have signed the New START, or START 3 in Russian, but we bypassed, we set aside to reach any breakthrough concerning tactical nuclear weapons or the places of deployment of tactical nuclear weapons of the United States as the starting point for dismantlement or reducing of tactical nuclear weapons. The same happened with IBM operational bases. Yes, we reached in Prague the same New START, or START 3, but forgotten to limit deployment of IBM operational bases. But they are also dual capable facilities, because it doesn't matter whether it's a platform borrowed from American Aegis vessels, combat vessels, and set ashore in Romania and later in Poland. But it has the same launching tubes that does not require any readjustments, and interceptors can be housed, then defensive system, then offensive like cruise missiles or ballistic missiles as well, plus hypersonic delivery system. So, and what I would like to tell, it's very important, I think, from my perspective. The United States of America has already displayed negative stance towards 14 either bilateral arms control agreements with us or multilateral arms control treaties. They are published in my books. Well, if it is needed, I can just remind the esteemed audience about that. But believe me, 14. And there are a number of treaties that the United States voluntarily and initially decided to quit. Besides the INF, Iranian nuclear deal, Arms Trade Treaty, still we are waiting when the US government decides to ratify Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. No go till now. We have, by the way, signed it and ratified it 22 years ago. And there are plenty of other things. And coming back to our beloved escalation for de-escalation, I would like also to remind one issue that has been overshadowed by other developments. It's collision of American and Soviet in the past and now Russian subs in underwater positions. That's when they are submerged. Look, the same way we signed SALT I in 1972, we signed a very good agreement between Washington and Moscow called INC-Sea Accord, what does it mean, this clumsy abbreviation? Incidents at Sea Prevention Agreements. And in the sky above it. So this INC Accord is proliferated to two types of naval platforms. I mean, surface combat vessels and combat submarines when they are also on the surface of the world oceans. But unfortunately, this 1972 INC Accord does not cover any types of subs, of our subs, American and Russian, in underwater position. And look, so far up to now, we had in the past 11 cases when our respective submarines, especially SSN, strategic submarine nuclear attack submarines, in other words, especially up north in the Barents Sea, we were very lucky that there was not any explosion, any emission of enhanced radiation, but nevertheless, this is also very bad, exercise. And I remember I attended the first round of U.S.-Russian naval talks with the agenda to include this kind of subs into this agreement, INC agreement. It was in mid-90s, last century, and American partners just explained to us that they would not like to draw grids in the world ocean. But we are of the same position. We do not like to draw grids or just kind of nets in the world oceans. But what we have suggested that time in mid-90s to American counterparts, let's not send our SSBN or SSN at least to the combat training areas of our respective navies, on the basis of reciprocity, naturally. And in the 20s, there was a second attempt to raise this question, but we've got a negative response, as well as in the security guarantees dated last December 2021, we've got also a very vague response from Washington. As to NATO alliance response, no response at all, as if it doesn't exist. But we have plenty of the same kind agreements signed with a number of NATO naval powers, with the UK, France, Italy, Federal Republic of Germany, some Netherlands, and on the side of the other side of the globe with Japan, South Korea. Yes, that's it.
Well, here's the deal. You're Russian. You're speaking logically. You're articulate. But we know you cheat. How do we know you cheat? The INF Treaty. The reason why we can't trust Russia in any of these arms control agreements is that you went and built a missile in violation of the INF Treaty. You lied about it. You hid it. You disguised it. And based upon that, how can we ever trust anything you say? I mean, what do you know about the 9M, I think it's 729 missile that the United States accuses Russia of violating the INF Treaty? Does it violate the INF Treaty? Did you negotiate in bad faith? Does the United States have reason to not trust Russia ever again when it comes to arms control? Because you'll just cheat. You'll just build a weapon that violates it, and then you'll lie about it. But this is what I read. If I go to these same esteemed journals, this is what I'm told when I read U.S. government documents, when I read everything, that you built a missile in violation of the INF Treaty. Did you build a missile in violation of the INF Treaty?
Yes, clear. Well, thank you very much for putting this question in front of me, because I personally spend a lot of time in trying to understand who is right, who is wrong. And ex-US President Ronald Reagan reminded me of the Russian proverb, "Доверяй, но проверяй." Trust but verify. So verification is conducted through many types of inspections: on-site inspections, challenging inspections, urgent inspections, on facilities, on production lines, etc., etc., etc. As to Russian violations, the missile you have mentioned, it has a firing range less than 500 kilometers. I would like to remind the audience that shorter range INF missiles are or were missiles that can be fired from 500 kilometers to 1,000 kilometers. Medium range missiles can be fired or could be fired from 1,000 kilometers to 5,500 kilometers. And beyond 5,500 kilometers, strategic offensive arms are being counted. So, no Russian missiles that have been produced before President Donald Trump decided to tear off the INF Treaty ever violated this kind of provisions of this very important treaty called the Cornerstone of Nuclear Arms Control, where we have decided, pledged to destroy these kind of weapons, shorter and medium range missile, globally, entirely. But this is on one hand. On the other hand, I used the Pentagon documents, non-classified, open for general public, plus the documents released by the US Congress. And I found out that United States used a number of medium-range INF, medium-range missiles for testing interceptor missiles, not on the not by means of computer, but practically in reality. So this medium-range missiles related to the INF Treaty were fired, and interceptor missiles in life, in reality, just try to intercept it and to destroy it. Look, from 1999 till 2019, the US side have used 117 such missiles. I don't know whether you have produced a kind of new missiles of this type, or simply not destroyed them all, but hided them a cluster of such missiles and use it for practical purposes. Because I understand the owners of such good systems to destroy, to explode, to just spending a lot of money for destruction, and plus earlier for construction. But nevertheless, it was really 117 violations of the INF Treaty by the United States. And as soon as President Trump decided to quit from the INF Treaty, the United States of America again resumed testing of interceptor missiles by using missiles of INF-related types. So, more than that, I have come across a piece of information in the open sources. I do not use classified information. I'm not such a person. but open sources, I've noticed that Lockheed Martin signed a contract with the Pentagon to create medium-range INF-related missile, which would be both conventionally tipped and nuclear-tipped missile. It's not ready, I suppose, but in a couple of more years, it will be produced and deployed in Europe as well, very close to our land, and in the Asian part of the globe, to create a threat to the People's Republic of China and North Korea. That's the story.
Okay, that's very depressing, because now I'm going to hit you with my last question. Like you, I've written a book about the INF Treaty, and I talk about that book not only as a work of history, but also I call it a template of success. That in the 1980s, the United States and the Soviet Union were in somewhat of a similar situation where we are today. A proxy war being fought in Afghanistan, the danger of nuclear confrontation, total distrust, massive forces facing off against one another, and a nuclear crisis built around intermediate nuclear forces. The SS-20 missile for the Soviets, the SS-12, United States, the ground-launched ballistic cruise missile, the Pershing II, very destabilizing. And Europe, and indeed the world, I believe, functioned on the cusp of imminent nuclear disaster. One mistake by either side could have led to the end of the world. And yet through that, and this was a time when the United States was called enemy number one by the Soviet Union, and we called the Soviet Union the evil empire. Not necessarily terminology that breeds a desire to cooperate, but somehow we found a way to come together and sign this foundational treaty, the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, and we made it work. We made it work despite all the obstacles, and there were many obstacles brought on by our politicians, by your politicians, by people in the military that weren't comfortable with this. We overcame everything and made the system work, and it worked to the mutual benefit of both parties. When people talk about the situation today, I often quote George Santayana. He's an American philosopher, perhaps most famously known for his statement, "Those who fail to learn the lessons of history are condemned to repeat them." But I say this is more a case of those who fail to learn about the successes of history are unable to repeat them. And I view the INF Treaty as a success. And I say that it could be used as a model to provide an off-ramp from the current crisis between Russia and the United States. Some people tell me that I'm naive. Some people tell me that I'm trapped in the past, that could never happen again. What do you think? And don't be afraid of hurting my feelings. What do you think? Is there a chance that our two nations could have an INF moment in the future that could help guide us out of the current situation we find ourselves in?
Scott, straightforward answer. Yes, I do believe that somewhere in the future, but not tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, but somewhere in the future, our two great nations will sit together and try to resolve all these nuclear arms control issues and other related issues to them, to avoid selective arms control posture or position, and would like to allay fears and threats, etc., we are still having. And many other nations all over the world are also just depending on this kind of ambiguity, threats, possibilities of unleash a nuclear war somewhere on the globe. As to the INF Treaty, I fully share your notion concerning validity and the assessment of the INF Treaty. It was a real, very good example for the next future generations During the Cold War time, you mentioned a number of regional conflicts that were just going on that time. But we managed two classes of nuclear missiles with a very limited flying time to their targets, respective targets. We managed to elaborate, to draft, and to sign and ratify, etc., etc. And a number of other nations, NATO allies, were also covered by the INF Treaty, namely the United Kingdom, for example, and some other nations. So, but I would like to be very frank. I don't know when we can sit together and debate all these issues. I think that the USA, NATO, and the OSCE, because we sent this security guarantees package deal papers to all these three addresses, unfortunately gave a negative answer. But in mid-December, you missed, not you personally, but the other side, our opposite number, missed a very lucky chance to respond to our offer wholeheartedly, positively, in constructive way. If it happened that time, there would not be any Ukraine confrontation, any threats to use nuclear weapons. And we know Ukraine will not be admitted to NATO alliance. And probably we today will be debating the next strategic arms Strategic Offensive Arms Reduction Treaty number 4, the next one. Even very soon, operationally, when Joseph Biden just made such a proposal, as I said, to the 10th review conference for the NPT. Because I think when we offer the Russian Federation, when we offer something, please not be quick to respond. Try to understand. Try to clarify some points that are not understandable for you. There might be, I quite imagine, but not just kick off our proposals from the table and said we do not like them, we will not consider them. So I think that during presidency of Joseph Biden, arms control in general terms between Moscow and Washington, and specifically on nuclear arms control, will be not negotiable. Cannot be negotiated. Better to say. Excuse me for my just blurring English. So, but we cannot exclude it in the future as well. Probably the other president of the United States will be rational, sober-minded, very positive person. We had many examples with the Reagan administration, with Obama, for example, and by the way, between John F. Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev in '62. We managed to avoid this Cuban Missile Crisis, which was very dangerous that time, because our nuclear capabilities not matched to carriers, to missiles, but have been delivered to Cuba and what was very close to the United States of America. It was a forward-based weapons. So, but let's hope for the best. But putting our fingers crossed and touch the wood, the most urgent task is the United States government, as an initial step, should stop sending Ukraine any types of lethal weapons. Yes, threatening not only Ukraine, but to us as well, and to four territories that recently joined Mama Россия, Mother Russia, to the great joy of the bulk majority of our population, and to many, many people of the world who understand that self-determination is a sacred right enshrined in Article 1 of the UN Charter. And those guys who said that we will never recognize this poor referendum and the joining accession of these four territories to Russia, my answer would be very clear. We do not care, but please be so kind. Read once more the UN Charter and other relevant internationally approved documents concerning rights to self-determination, democracy, equality of all nations. That's all I wanted to say, Scott. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think what we can take away is that we live in a day and age of great danger. But this isn't the first time. This has happened in the past. There have been missed opportunities as well. Vladimir Kozin, my esteemed guest, talked about the missed opportunity of last December. And I'm sure that there's parallels with the prior missed opportunities that led up to the INF Treaty. So I think the one bright, shining takeaway from this otherwise very depressing talk is that there's hope. There's hope in the future that if we can survive the present times and we can have leaders who emerge who are rational thinking, that we can recapture that one brief shining moment that we call the INF Treaty, the Camelot of arms control. It can be resurrected. So with that hope, again, I'd like to thank my guest, Vladimir Kozin, esteemed Russian academic and expert on arms control. And I'd like to thank the audience for watching this episode. And remember, knowledge is power. Thanks for tuning in.